But the controversy, let's say, continues to rumble. A video released this week suggests that Tyson Fury's hand wasn't fully in his glove, and therefore when he was hooking mainly, his bare fist was connecting with Deontay Wilder. Now, we've looked into this in great detail, and it would appear to be the video actually from the first fight, not the second fight. But the question still remains, George. It does look, well, let's call it interesting.
Well, you can't dispute that the glove isn't on properly. They've froze it down frame by frame. His hand isn't in the glove properly. The video that I saw, the guy is now saying that was done purposefully. He's hitting Wilder with like a bare fist, as you say, and that was having the effect. It is bizarre. His hand definitely is not in the glove properly, but if you took the padding out of that glove and it was just leather, you could do that much more damage. If your hand is secured strong with under tape and bandage, then I'm just imagining some of the big punches out there. If they were hitting you with nothing in the glove, it would make a massive difference. But that idea of not having the gloves on, obviously, and having the edge just dangling almost, nothing there, and trying to get your fist through a lace it.
Because it looks like he's punching rather than landing with his knuckles. He's sort of landing with the front of his hand. So surely the idea of not having, your hand padded is negated by the fact he's not actually punching correctly then. So I don't see the benefit in it. But it seems to be something in the video. There's clearly something going on. Yeah,
but if you don't punch properly to start with, because Tyson, he does it better in his latest fight, but he doesn't actually sit on his shots and throw. He doesn't throw a right hand like Deontay Wilder does. They are arm shots, and sometimes they are palm facing, and have that sort of that slap effect. 9 times out of 10 fighters end up doing that because they have sore hands, and they just Calzaghe being probably the most famous, who had hand trouble and ended up sort of slapping at times. So it's really interesting. I don't know exactly. I don't know. It seems like if they're poor gloves, and I don't want the stock shares of Pathin to fall at the sight of this video. But if the gloves aren't made particularly that well, then maybe they were just a bit loose, a bit big, and it started off, correctly. But as the fight's gone on, his hand has slipped down. I don't know. It is fascinating. Definitely.
Can we categorically say then that you never had your hand in the laces so you could knock people out easier?
Nah. I would.
Big man ting, smash the like button and subscribe. So we just heard there from George, slumped on his own leg, Groves. Now, there's something about these certain cats, These certain cats who get memorialized, otherwise known as memed, in certain situations. They carry a level of salt when particular people get to a level of prowess. Now, I'll be honest, even Tyson Fury himself, I believe, when AJ was completely on top and there was no doubt when Fury had no good wins and Fury had to peel himself off the canvas, I feel Fury was a bit like that towards AJ. However, now the tables have turned somewhat, in as much as Fury now, arguably, can be seen on a similar level to AJ, in as much as he actually has a stoppage win over a relatively high level opponent. The first of his career, really. Look at Fury's career. He's never stopped. In fact, he's only really fought 2 world-level opponents in Wilder and Klitschko, and the first one was a bore-fest. So this win over Wilder puts him in the realm, not to the level of, but in the realm of AJ. Meaning that, look, AJ is the guy who knocks out Povetkin, Dillian White, Vladimir. See what I'm trying to say? Yeah? But anyway, the point is, what happens is, you get these cats memorialised, these memed cats, like George Groves, like Tyson Fury formerly, and it gets them hella sour, yeah? It makes them sour. George Groves making these comments, oh yeah, Fury's Fury's wrist, you can't deny it. Oh, you can't deny it. Oh, his hand's definitely in there. I'm not sure about this, I'm not sure about that. Dude, it makes no sense. I've just tried it myself, yeah. Never mind a pro boxer like George Groves. I've actually just gone and got a pair of gloves for myself, yeah, and put my fist in the wrist element. And yeah, there's no, well, even then there's a level of padding because you've got the thin leather layer. But let's ignore that. The fact of the matter is, put your fist in the wrist piece and not the actual hand piece. And what you'll notice is, people talking about, Fury was hitting Wilder with his bare knuckle. The only knuckle you can hit them with are your two middle knuckles. Does that make sense? For example, on this channel, we often talk about the most explosive way of hurting a man is to do with which knuckles you choose to use. These two knuckles are your two index finger and middle finger actual knuckles. They're the two big daddies. Stick your hand out in front and you'll see what I mean. Make a fist, your two big daddy knuckles. However, when you put your hand in the glove, yeah, like they're saying that Fury did, the only knuckles you can punch with are your first two knuckles, the ones that sit next to your fingernail, and the other one, the middle one, which are both of them two, or all of them lot, they're tiny and useless. They've got nothing on them. So you're basically saying the only way this theory makes sense is if Fury chose to instead not hit Wilder with his big daddy knuckles, and instead opt for the small ones which are liable to break, especially when there's no padding, etc, etc. It don't make no sense at all. Not to mention the picture you see on your screen now. Now, to be fair, I've often criticised Fury's technique for being slappy, and George Groves even talks about it here. But what do we know? The picture on your screen now, Fury has spent 7 weeks at the Kronk and 2-2s. You can actually already start to see him turning his hooks over. That there is what we can... It's not a Mike Tyson hook. When Mike Tyson hooks, he hooks and his arm's at 90 degrees. Yeah, it's short, it's tight. His elbow's in line with his hand almost as he connects. But this here is definitely an improvement. And then guess what? This is of the second fight. Is it a coincidence that the fight where Fury stops Wilder, that Fury's finally starting to get over it on his hooks? You can see it perfectly. Fury there is digging his two big knuckles onto Wilder's era-trained pointy chin, and that's why Wilder went splat. That's why he got hit with the orgasmic one. That's why he got hit with a squirter. Yeah, that's why he was squirting out of his ear. It wasn't nothing to do with he was slapping, this, that, the other. And do you know what the crazy thing is? If Fury was slapping him, if Fury was doing all this goofy stuff with, his hands are in the wrist piece, that makes it even worse for your champion. Because do you know how hard it is to generate power with slaps? Or to generate power with them two little knuckles? Without breaking your hand? Does that make sense? You'd have to de-throttle the amount of a 280-pound inside fightedness, 2'9", 6'9", 205 centimeters, 280 pounds of inside fightingness man. Do you know how much you'd have to de-throttle his shot not to break them two small knuckles? It's hard enough not to break your big knuckles. Never mind the two little ones that were never designed to punch with, and which have no protection because you're not actually using the glove. I'm just shocked to see George the hater Groves, George the memed Groves. Listen, Fury's gone on to do something that Groves couldn't do, literally. What happened? Similar circumstances, actually, really, when you think about it. George Groves went to, I forgot where it was, wherever arena it was, went there with, who was it? Carl Froch. Got got arguably beaten. It was similar to the Fury versus Wilder 1. Got beaten. 2-2s. Comes back. Difference is, instead of Groves splattering Froch, Groves got splattered. And Groves is basically feeling sour because he thought, Fury was meant to be splattered like I was in the rematch. Why is it that Fury went on to do what I couldn't do? That's what it feels like to me. Because to hear this man sit here and actually give it any level of justification, this man's mad. And especially when you so-called know boxing. We know Fury, that's how he's always thrown his shots, and no one's complained. In fact, never mind that, I'm going to do more videos on this, but the fact of the matter is, do you not find it odd that Mr. Excuses Wilder still to this day hasn't even mentioned, if there was anyone who really had a problem with the way he was being hit, or, Fury was hitting me with his two middle knuckles. Fury was hitting me with his little knuckles with no padding on. Why hasn't Wilder said that yet? Why haven't we heard a peep out of Wilder's team? And you can't sit there and say, well, Wilder's team don't like making excuses. Mr. My 40-pound jacket, which, by the way, I train with every day, was too heavy. You best believe, if this was a valid excuse, he'd be all over it. Fury's punches were hurting a little harder because he had no padding on his glove, because he had his fist in the wrist. That's what you'd be hearing now. We haven't heard a peep out of Wilder about none of this. And not only that, the actual evidence, which you've seen on your screen here, is of Fury turning his hands over. Now, of course, in a fight, when you got two men doing different things, your hands may end up in different angles. Not to mention, I actually believe Fury may be double jointed in his wrist, which would explain why historically his wrist ends up bending and not looking normal. And you got to also bear in mind, we have evidence to support this. What do we know? Fury, when spending time in the Kronk gym, categorically came out and said, I've been really frustrated, I've been struggling trying to learn the techniques. Now when your body mechanics are kind of made differently, or made in a way that's inverse to the technique you're training, that would make sense, wouldn't it? A man who's got double jointed wrists, for example, may find it harder naturally to turn his hands over. His natural predisposition may be having it slappy. Hence why his whole career he's been slapping. Now anyone who follows my channel, you know that we've always laughed and talked about Fury slapping. That was no joke. In fact, Wilder himself came out before and said, Fury don't have no power. He slaps. He pillow fisted. It was all, you man was laughing and joking about it, but now he gets knocked out by a pillow fist, and also it's a conspiracy. No, you can't have it both ways. Before the fight, Fury's slapping technique can't be all funny and laughy, and then after the fight, when you do get knocked out by that same slappy style, which by the way it wasn't, as you've seen by the picture. His hand's actually starting to turn over. His hand's actually in front of his elbow. Starting to turn that hook over. So where was the slap here then? Surely if a man goes in there, with a strategy to cheat, why aren't all the shots the same? Because that's what would happen. Yeah, if you have a strategy of cheating, you go in there saying, you know what, every hook I throw, I'm throwing it this way. With my two little knuckles in the unprotected part. Why on this particular shot did he throw it this way? Explain. Don't know. Either is he cheating or is he not cheating? What makes more sense is that if there's a variation, it may be sometimes, bearing in mind he's learnt a new technique, sometimes when he's had time or he's not rushing his work, he's actually reliving the 7 weeks of training. Sometimes he's turning it over, as we see in the picture on your screen, or sometimes he reverts back to what he's done before, which is more of the open hand, more of the slap. Does that not make more sense? Not to mention, something that this so-called professional boxer George Groves don't really spend much time on is the fact that, okay, let's say Fury did employ this goofy strategy of having his two small, weak, useless knuckles and opt in. You got to bear in mind though, these are the biggest men. If these were 120-pound men, it might be a smart strategy because, do you know what I mean? Like, oh, you can't really generate much power anyway, but you can bet your bottom dollar a 280-pound man in 10-ounce gloves is going to opt to go for his two big, heavy knuckles over slapping with his two inside small knuckles any day of the week. But put that to one side, Mr. George Groves, Mr. Pro Boxer, completely forgets that, okay, let's say Fury did opt to choose his two small little piddly piddly middle knuckles, small knuckles, to throw hooks with. This completely negates any straight shot strategy. And by the way, apart from the left hook body so-called slap that Wilder got put down by Fury, guess what? All of the main shots that put Fury down were straight ones. Jabs, hard right hands. So please explain to me this logic then. Because if you can't have it both ways, either Fury's hands, it's not an exchangeable thing. You can't just suddenly, it's not a computer game where you choose which shot you're going to hit him with. Oh, alternate to this one now. Oh, click B for slap. Click X for turnover. Click Y for knuckles in the wrist part. It don't work like that. Either his gloves are secured or secured properly, or his knuckles are secured into the wrist part. Meaning that when it comes to straight shots, which are the majority of shots thrown, which are the majority of shots that put Wilder down. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was an overhand, kind of right, which hit Wilder on the back of it. Hit Wilder on the back of his clat in the first knockdown. So if that was the case, that Fury was cheating, how is that even possible? Because for your hand to be that far down the glove, that leaves you like 2 feet, or not? Sorry, that leaves you like what? A good about a half a foot of empty glove, empty soft pillow. That's the definition of a pillow. That would be if you put your hands, or if you put your fist only into the wrist part, then all of the padding is empty. So when you throw your straight shots, they're going to have no effect at all. Now, don't get me wrong, Wilder is completely chinless, but still, think about it for a second. Try it yourself. Put your fist into a glove, or into the wrist part of a glove and secure it. Then try and throw a straight shot on the bag. It's almost impossible to create any force, because you've got literally miles of just dead, empty padding. Mike Tyson would talk about how when he'd get his gloves on, he'd be banging them together really hard or hitting the walls with them on, trying to break the leather down, trying to reduce the amount of distance between his knuckles and the leather. This theory here is Fury basically saying, you know what, I want to increase the distance between my knuckles and the opponent. And it's literally massive, the amount of distance it'd be. You're literally saying you want to increase the distance by about a foot, which makes no sense, and it'd be obvious. The shots would literally bounce off of Wilder. It'd literally be like hitting someone with a pillow. So it even makes it worse for your champion. If Fury was employing these strategies, then your man got knocked out by literally a pillow. Wow. George Groves, shocker, absolute mare, mate. Listen, your time's over. You got slumped in front of 80,000. Suck it up. Fury for now is riding a wave, and just let him ride the wave. You look at what's in front of you. Yeah, that wrist is turned in to me. Don't look like no slap to me. And a lot of the stuff is from the first fight anyway, you muppet. No one's saying squat about the second fight, so I don't really get it. The first fight he didn't have no power. The second fight he did. So even if he was employing some sort of weird strategy, it actually did him worse. And lo and behold, actually turning shots over has helped him. What a surprise. The YB correct again.